They said it was a gift. Said I deserved it after everything. After losing George, after raising 3 children mostly alone, after caring for my own mother until she forgot who I was and died calling me Lena, her sister, who drowned in 1938. My daughter Julie stood in my kitchen with that wide, artificial smile of hers, the one that shows teeth but never warmth, and handed me a thick envelope with a gold ribbon. Inside, tickets, a cruise. Luxury, Mom. Full month, no chores, no noise, just rest. You need this. I smiled. Because that's what we do, isn't it? We smile, especially when our own daughter frames abandonment as a reward. I was 73. My knees cracked when I stood, and my eyes watered in the morning like they'd remembered all I'd seen and couldn't unsee it. But I still remembered how to walk straight and how to nod politely while feeling a storm under my ribs. A cruise? I repeated. Alone? Julie waved it off. Everyone goes solo these days, and the ship's full of people your age. They have everything. Doctors, entertainment, gourmet food, even mindfulness sessions. She mimed quotation marks like she was telling an inside joke. I forced another smile. I noticed she didn't mention Wi-Fi or a return date. The brochure was glossy and thick, printed on heavy paper that smelled of new ink and eucalyptus. The title was embossed in elegant serif font, Aurelia Horizons, Redefining Rest. The rest of the text was full of fluff, an exclusive journey, tailored experiences for the distinguished, a vessel of serenity, no ports listed, just a launch dock, no contact details, just a QR code that led to a countdown page. I should have said no, but George would have said, "Don't make a fuss, Maggie. Let them feel good about themselves." So I nodded, packed my things, and boarded a ship I didn't choose for a trip I didn't ask for. The dock was in a private harbor, hours away. Julie drove me, barely speaking. At the security gate, we were met by men in pale gray uniforms with matching gloves. One scanned my ticket. Another took my suitcase. Julie didn't come past the gate. "Only passengers beyond this point, ma'am," one of the men said. I turned to Julie. "You're not even going to walk me on?" She looked guilty. "It's a closed system, Mom. Controlled environment. You'll understand once you're inside. It's better that way." I swallowed a lump. Better for who? But she was already hugging me. Not tight, not long. Just enough for the cameras, probably. The boarding tunnel smelled like lemon disinfectant. The air was cold. Inside, the ship was dazzling. Marble floors, quiet classical music, attendants in white gloves offering cucumber water and pressed towels. I said, "Thank you," because manners are bones you don't break even under pressure. My cabin was small but pristine. Everything white and silver. No television, no phone, no Wi-Fi. The tablet on the desk had only one function, a rotating schedule of activities: Tai Chi, watercolor, guided gratitude, memory circles. No port stops listed, no weather forecast, no map. That first night, I couldn't sleep. I sat on the narrow bed, listening to the hum of the engines and the occasional creak of the hull. The ship was too quiet. I opened the desk drawer. No pen. No notepad. Just a printed note. Aurelia Horizons. Thanks you for surrendering the burdens of the world. Rest is a form of courage. I went to the door. It was locked from the outside. When I knocked, no one came. I tried again, harder. Finally, I heard a chime and the door slid open. A woman stood there, smiling. Beige uniform. Empty eyes. "Is everything all right, Miss Pearson?" Why was my door locked? Oh, it's not locked. Just secured for your safety. We've had guests wander at night and become disoriented. Nothing to worry about. I'd like to call my daughter. She smiled wider. Of course. Our communication suite opens in the morning. After breakfast, we'll show you. Please, try to rest. She waited. I stepped back. The door closed again. I didn't sleep. I sat by the window, looking out into the endless black water. No land, no lights, just the cold reflection of a woman they thought would be too tired to question anything. They thought wrong. By morning, the sea looked like an endless slate, smooth, gray, and unreadable. I stared at it through the porthole as I sipped weak coffee from a white porcelain cup. Breakfast had been delivered to my room without a knock. A tray with eggs that looked sculpted out of rubber and toast that snapped in half like cardboard. No note. No server. I checked the tablet. My schedule had been updated overnight. At 10 a.m. it read, Orientation, welcome to your next chapter. At noon, Nutrition for longevity. At 3 p.m., Letting go, guided discussion. All in that same soft, patronizing tone, like we were all one deep breath away from crumbling. At 9:55, my door chimed. This time it wasn't locked. A man in his 60s stood there, tall, trim, and smiling, in that same way everyone here seemed trained to smile. Soft, robotic, and with no real investment. Miss Pearson, he said, bowing slightly. My name is Elliot. I'll be your onboard liaison. Liaison to what? I asked. He chuckled gently. To comfort, clarity, the next version of yourself. I didn't return the smile. Where's the communication suite? I asked. All in good time, he said. Let's get you settled in first. I'm already settled. I want to call my family. He placed a hand over his heart. Absolutely. We encourage all guests to connect, but only after the initial decompression period. It's important to detach gently from external pressures. I'm not a suitcase to be unzipped, Mr. Elliot. He paused, and his smile thinned, just slightly. Let's go to orientation, shall we? The hallways were wide, sterile, and eerily quiet. No chatter, no laughter, just footsteps and piped-in flutes. The orientation room was already half full when we arrived. Rows of chairs arranged in a semicircle, all facing a wide screen that displayed a slow-motion video of waves crashing against nothing. The other guests were mostly women like me, 60s, 70s, 80s. A few men, scattered. Most looked wary, some looked sedated. No one had a phone. No one asked questions. I sat beside a woman with silver hair in a perfect French twist and a floral scarf tied tightly around her neck. She turned to me and gave a tiny, guarded smile. Margaret, I offered, extending a hand. Imogen, she replied, shaking it gently. Her grip was stronger than I expected. A voice crackled through the speaker system. Welcome, honored travelers. Today marks the beginning of your transformation. A woman in a sleek beige suit stepped onto the low stage. She moved like a ballerina, but spoke like a therapist. Smooth, careful, prepared. You have been chosen for this experience not just for who you are, she said, but for what you've endured. You are the resilient, the survivors, the generation that built and bore and buried. It is time now to let go. I glanced at Imogen. Her eyes narrowed slightly. We weren't buying it. Over the next several weeks, the woman continued, you will be guided gently through a curated process of release. There will be no distractions, no outside interference, no pressure to return to a world that has already taken so much from you. No return. That word again. I raised my hand. Slowly, deliberately. The woman faltered, then smiled. Yes? How long is this voyage? She paused. Until you are ready. And if I'm ready now? A ripple of discomfort in the room. A few heads turned. She smiled wider. No one is ready at the beginning. You'll see. By the end of the session, no one clapped. There had been no Q&A. Elliot reappeared at my side. You handled that very gracefully, he said. I wasn't trying to be graceful. He ignored the tone. Would you like to see the communication suite now? I nodded. He led me down a different hallway this time, deeper into the belly of the ship. No windows, just walls the color of old paper, and the same music humming through hidden speakers. We stopped at a sealed glass room labeled comms. Inside, 6 white booths, each with a screen and headset. All messages are monitored, Elliot said lightly, for safety. Standard maritime policy. I stepped inside a booth. The screen blinked awake. A prompt. Voice or video? I chose voice. If they were going to listen, they'd do it without seeing my face. I called Julie. It rang and rang, then clicked. A recording. Thank you for reaching out to a guest of Aurelia Horizons. This user has enabled Serenity mode. They are currently unavailable. I tried again. Same result. I tried my son, then my neighbor, then my lawyer. Every number. Same message. Elliot knocked gently on the glass. I turned around slowly. Sometimes they don't answer right away, he said. It's best not to dwell. I left the booth. I didn't thank him. I walked back to my cabin alone. That night, I wrote on the back of the orientation pamphlet with a lip liner I found in my purse. Day 2, no contact, no signal, no truth. They've cut the cord. But they've forgotten something. I still know how to tie knots. I folded the note and hid it under the mattress. Not because someone might find it, because someone will. The third morning started with fog thick enough to erase the horizon. I pressed my forehead to the porthole, looking for any break in the gray. Nothing. Not a ship. Not a bird. Not even the shimmer of waves. It was as if the sea had swallowed the sky. My breakfast tray arrived exactly at 7 again. The same toast, the same lukewarm coffee, the same pressed fruit arranged like a face I didn't want to recognize. This time, though, it came with a small card. Today's feature. Watercolor with purpose, unlocking expression after 60. I left it untouched. Instead, I went walking. The halls weren't empty anymore. More of us were stirring now. White-haired women in orthopedic shoes, men in polo shirts with sleeves too tight around old biceps. We passed each other with polite nods. No one spoke first. Near the library, I saw her again. Imogen, the woman from orientation. She stood with a cup of tea, gazing at a massive painting of a glacier calving into the sea. The colors were bright, but the subject was cold. "Good morning," I said, stepping beside her. She turned. Margaret. We were already on first-name terms, as if the ship itself insisted on fast familiarity. "This place," I said. "Does it feel off to you?" She exhaled through her nose. "Like a funeral home pretending to be a spa." I liked her immediately. "I tried calling my daughter yesterday," I said. No answer, not even voicemail. Just that same message, Serenity mode. Imogen nodded. "Mine too. My son's wife gifted this cruise for my birthday." "To rest and reset," she said. Her tone told me she'd already moved my boxes into storage. I watched her fingers tremble slightly as she sipped. Not fear, fury. "They've washed their hands of us," she said softly, but dressed it up in silk and soft voices. More passengers were filtering through the hallway now. Some looked dazed. Others moved with practiced acceptance, like long-term residents of a place pretending to be temporary. One man caught my attention. He walked with a cane, stiff but determined, dressed in a crisp button-up shirt, suspenders, and freshly polished shoes. His eyes, unlike the others, scanned constantly. Windows, cameras, exits. Imogen noticed too. That's Harold, retired police, I think. He's been pacing the deck every morning since we left. Pacing or mapping? She smiled, tight and knowing. Let's find out. We caught up to him near the bow, where the open-air lounge was still deserted. The sea stretched in all directions, blank and unbroken. Morning, I offered. He turned slowly, eyed us both. You don't look like the yoga crowd, he said. We're not, Imogen replied. He nodded. Good. His accent was clipped, northern. Liverpool, maybe. He looked down at my shoes. You walked the full deck? Just started, I said. You should. No better way to see who's watching. We followed his gaze. At the far end of the deck, one of the beige uniformed attendants stood by the railing. Not talking, not smiling, just watching. That one's new, Harold said. They rotate shifts every 6 hours, 4 per deck. Never speak unless spoken to. Never answer questions directly. How long have you been tracking them? I asked. Since day 1. He pulled a folded napkin from his pocket and opened it. A hand-drawn map, crude but detailed. Stairs, rooms, blind spots. Imogen whistled softly. You think we're prisoners? I asked. Harold didn't look up. I think we're something worse. We're liabilities. A long silence stretched between us. Then Harold looked at me directly. You were sent here, weren't you? Not asked, not offered, just sent. I nodded once. My daughter said it was time for me to rest. Imogen said, eyes hard. Harold folded the map again. They built this ship like a vault. There's nowhere to go. No landfall, no signals. They say it's a cruise, but it's a facility. A floating facility for inconvenient people. He wasn't wrong. Every part of this voyage had been designed for control. The locked doors, the monitored calls, the absent staff, the endless talk of release. It wasn't rest. It was erasure. And no one plans to bring us back, I whispered. Harold's jaw flexed. Exactly. We stood in the morning air for a while, not speaking, just absorbing the truth we'd all started to suspect, but hadn't dared say aloud. Then Imogen spoke. If they wanted us gone quietly, they picked the wrong crowd. Harold gave a crooked grin. That's what I'm counting on. He walked off, slow and measured, cane tapping in time. Imogen looked at me. You still have that lip liner? I smiled for the first time all day. Always. The 4th morning, I opened my eyes before the ship's subtle chime announced wake-up time. I hadn't needed the sound. I'd barely slept. My thoughts had been circling all night, like a hawk too tired to land. Harold's words, a facility for inconvenient people, kept echoing. The napkin map, the locked doors, the fabricated serenity. It was all starting to line up too neatly. By 6:30, I was dressed and walking the corridors again, slower this time, eyes sharper. Every turn was too symmetrical, every wall the same shade of forgettable. There were no signs pointing to emergency exits, no fire extinguishers, no deck plans on the walls. Nothing that would imply escape was either possible or permitted. Even hotels had more transparency than this place. I made my way to the forward lounge, hoping to catch Harold before his walk. Instead, I found someone else. A woman sat by the window, hunched slightly over a notebook, scribbling. Her short white hair looked like it had been cut with garden shears. She wore a sweater with hand-stitched patches and orthopedic sandals with socks. But it was her eyes, behind thick, cracked glasses, that caught me. Sharp, alert, watching the ocean like it owed her answers. "Morning," I offered, easing into the chair beside her. She didn't look up. "If you're here for watercolor, you're 2 hours early." "Not much of a painter." She smirked, still writing. "I'm Margaret," I said. Finally, she looked up. "Nancy. What are you working on?" "Distances, trajectory, angle of turn during the night." I blinked. "Pardon?" She closed the notebook and tapped its cover. "This ship turns slightly between 2 and 4 a.m. I timed it. Not enough for a full circle, just enough to avoid land. We've passed nothing, because we're not trying to get anywhere." "You've been tracking it?" "Every night since day 2. She glanced at me. "Let me guess. You've started to notice things." I nodded. "They say we're on a journey, but we're not going anywhere." Nancy snorted. "Of course not. Journeys require destinations." "Do you know Harold?" I asked. Her eyes lit with mild amusement. "The ex-cop with the cane?" We've nodded at each other. "He's mapping, too." "Good." She leaned in slightly. "Because someone needs to." The lounge door slid open. A few others entered. Couples, singles, all dressed in beige or pastel, all moving with the same dulled rhythm. The ship was full of the elderly, but none of the usual joy or chaos that came with that age group. No arguments, no loud laughter, no spilled coffee or misplaced dentures. It was all too quiet, too controlled. Nancy nudged me. "Look at them." I glanced around. Blank stares, slow shuffles, smiles that didn't reach the eyes. "I think some of them have been here longer than they remember," she said quietly. "I tried asking a woman last night where she was from. She paused for so long, I thought she'd fallen asleep. Then she said, 'I was somewhere once, I think.'" "They're drugging people," I said, before I could stop myself. Nancy didn't flinch. "Maybe. Maybe it's just enough isolation, enough silence, enough condescension. Either way, it erodes." We sat in silence for a moment, watching the ocean. The sky had turned a strange lavender, neither sunrise nor storm. "I have a question," I said. "Have you seen any ports? Any islands? Anything at all?" She shook her head. "Nothing but water. One time I thought I saw a freighter on the horizon." I waved. "Nothing. I think the windows are tinted." "Tinted?" "To obscure light from within, and maybe distort what's beyond." I shivered. That afternoon I found Harold in the library, pretending to read a naval history book. When he saw me, he nodded and tilted the page toward the window, as if to say, "Not here." I understood. Later, we met in a utility stairwell between decks 3 and 4. Imogen joined us, and then, to my surprise, so did Nancy. Harold looked at the 3 of us. "All right," he said. "We're not alone anymore." "We need a way to signal," Nancy said. "Something physical, something that can't be wiped or erased." I pulled out my lip liner. Imogen grinned. "She's got weapons." Harold laid out his napkin map again. "We need to start identifying the non-passenger areas, staff access doors, maintenance shafts, anything they don't want us near." Nancy nodded. "And we need to find out how long this ship's been at sea. For real. They won't tell us, but maybe the systems will." "We'll need someone good with tech," Harold said. "I used to teach computer literacy at the Adult Ed Center," Nancy replied flatly. "I'll manage." We made a pact then. Nothing dramatic, no speeches. Just a simple agreement. We weren't going to go quietly. And as we stood in that metal stairwell, surrounded by the steady hum of engineered calm, I felt something stir in my chest. Not fear, not grief, but something older, something sharper. I remembered who I was before I became Mom, before I was Nana, before I was Margaret the widowed. I was a woman who knew how to read a room, hold her tongue, and wait for the right moment to strike. I wasn't going to die on this ship. Not quietly. Not conveniently. Not as anyone's idea of closure. They called it mindfulness hour, but it felt like indoctrination. We were herded, politely, always politely, into a softly lit hall with beanbags and fake plants. The staff referred to it as the garden room, though there wasn't a single window. The walls projected slow-moving visuals, drifting clouds, open fields, wind over wheat. All too clean, all too smooth. Like stock footage for a pharmaceutical ad. I sat near the back, Imogen beside me. Nancy was already there, legs crossed, notebook open on her lap, scribbling discreetly under her scarf. Harold didn't show. He'd warned us earlier he'd opted out due to a sudden knee flare-up, which we all understood was code for watching from the outside. The session began with that same woman from orientation. She never gave her name, only referred to herself as a facilitator. She wore soft tan clothing and always moved like she was walking through incense. "Let's begin," she said gently, sitting cross-legged on a cushion too white to have ever been sat on. "Close your eyes. Breathe. Picture yourself unburdened." A few around us obeyed. I heard sighs. One woman murmured, like a Pavlovian response. The facilitator continued. "You've carried so much. Families, loss, labor, worry. But now you're here. Now you can let it all fall away." She paused, letting her words settle like dust on old furniture. "Your name, your address, even your memory, these are constructs. They can be softened, eased. You don't need to hold them anymore." My jaw tightened. I felt Imogen shift beside me. "They call this mindfulness?" she whispered. I didn't answer. The facilitator's voice was syrup smooth. "Imagine placing all of your burdens into a basket. Your regrets, your obligations, your expectations. Place them there and let the basket float away." She held a long silence. Then, in the quiet, came the phrase we hadn't heard before. "You are no longer needed to hold the world." I snapped my eyes open. Imogen's hand found mine. Her grip was cold, but steady, no longer needed. That was the whole trick, wasn't it? Not just physical removal, psychological disarmament. The slow erosion of self. The suggestion that rest means release, and release means disappearance. The session ended with herbal tea and soft music. We were invited to write a memory we're ready to let go of and drop it into a wicker basket lined with velvet. I wrote, "I remember the woman I was before you told me to forget her, and I won't be letting her go." I didn't drop it in the basket. I slid it into my pocket. That evening, we gathered in the back stairwell again. Harold looked grim. "They're accelerating," he said without preamble. "Staff changeover every 4 hours now, not 6. More surveillance. They've started tagging cabin entrances with motion logs." "Tagging?" Imogen asked. "They can tell how often we come and go." "Which means they know we've formed a pattern," Nancy muttered. "That's a warning." She opened her notebook. Today's session, full of language about surrendering memory, about being unnecessary. "They're grooming us," I said quietly. "No," Imogen corrected. "They're programming us to comply with our own disappearance." Harold pulled out a small, stolen staff badge. "Found this on a locker hook in the gym. Doesn't unlock much, but it got me into a storage closet." He held up a key card, bent at the corner. One of the food delivery staff must have dropped it. I'm betting it accesses the lower levels. Engine room, or maybe control center, Nancy finished. We need to know how this place is run, who's steering the ship, if anyone. And we need to know how they're keeping us in, I added. There's no signal, no visible crew, and every direction is just water. But that doesn't happen by accident. It's designed. Nancy looked at Harold. Do you trust us? I trust that I'm too old to play dumb, he replied. Imogen pulled out a folded napkin of her own. On it were hand-drawn vents and shaft layouts. I'm not just here for the tea, she said dryly. My late husband was an architect. I learned to read airflow like most people read novels. The ship breathes like a building. I've been following the rhythm. Nancy leaned forward, almost giddy. So we're not just four old people grumbling about breakfast? We're four old people preparing a heist, I said. We all chuckled, just briefly. It felt good. It felt like something sharp inside us had turned back on. But it didn't last, because that night, something happened. Nancy didn't show up for our 11 check-in. Not in her room, not in the lounge, not in the stairwell. Her tablet had gone dark, and when I knocked on her door, no one answered. At midnight, her cabin was empty, her bed untouched, and her name no longer appeared on the schedule list. By morning, Nancy had been erased. Her cabin door now bore a different name, Clara Bennett. A woman I'd never seen before answered it, smiling vaguely, wearing one of those pastel cardigans that seem to multiply on this ship. I think you have the wrong room, dear, she said, her voice syrupy, too calm. I looked past her shoulder. Same suitcase, same sweater with the hand-stitched patches, folded neatly on the chair, but her eyes were blank. Where's Nancy? I asked. She blinked twice, as if searching through static. I'm sorry, who? Before I could answer, a beige uniformed attendant appeared from the corridor, a young man with perfect posture and dead eyes. Is there a problem, Miss Pearson? I took a slow step back. No, just introducing myself. He smiled. Wonderful. Let's allow Miss Bennett to enjoy her morning, shall we? He waited until I turned away. I did, slowly, deliberately. But the look I gave Clara wasn't for her. It was for whoever was inside her, or behind her. Imogen found me an hour later in the lounge, staring into the motionless sea. She's gone, isn't she? I nodded. Harold joined us a moment later, cane clicking softly against the floor. His jaw was tight. Checked the roster tablet in the corridor. No Nancy. No disembarkation notice either. They wiped her clean. Did you talk to anyone? Imogen asked. I tried the staff, Harold said. They all say the same phrase. Guests sometimes choose early transition, whatever that means. I looked up sharply. Transition to where? No one answered. Imogen's hand trembled as she poured herself a cup of lukewarm tea. They're not killing people, are they? Not directly, Harold said. They just make you agree to disappear. We sat in silence. Around us, the room was filled with the faint hum of ventilation, the kind of sound that lulls you if you stop resisting it. Maybe that was the point. I pushed my cup aside. We can't just wait to be the next transition. Harold nodded. We need to get below deck, tonight. After dinner, another identical tray of beige food and overcooked vegetables, I waited until the hall lights dimmed. Shipboard night came on a timer. Even darkness here was artificial. At 11:15, I slipped into the corridor. The air smelled faintly of bleach and lavender, a combination that reminded me of nursing homes. Imogen met me halfway to the stairwell, her hair tied up in a scarf. "Harold's already there," she whispered. We descended the metal stairs quietly, every creak amplified in the silence. The lower decks looked different. Raw metal walls, humming pipes, no flowers or soft lights. The pretense of luxury ended here. Harold waited near a service door marked, "Authorized crew only." He held up the bent badge. Let's see if Nancy's sacrifice was worth it. The scanner light blinked green. The lock clicked open. The smell hit first. A mix of oil, machinery, and something chemical, sterile. The passage was lined with gray panels, humming quietly. We followed the sound. At the end of the corridor was a glass wall. Behind it, screens. Rows of them. Cameras showing every hallway, every lounge, every dining area, every one of us. Imogen pressed closer to the glass. "They're watching everything." Harold pointed to a console. "And recording it. Look at the timestamps. Weeks old." "Maybe months," I said. "How long has this ship been at sea?" On one of the screens, I saw Nancy. Or rather, the moment before she vanished. She was speaking to someone in uniform, gesturing toward a notebook in her hand. Then static. Then nothing. I turned to Harold. "We have to find where that footage is stored." He nodded. "There's a data core, maybe a server room near the stern. But if we're caught—" Imogen interrupted, her voice low but steady. "If we're caught, at least we'll know what happened to us. And to her." We slipped back into the stairwell, closing the door carefully behind us. No alarm, no footsteps, only the dull vibration of engines beneath our feet. As we reached Deck 3, Harold stopped suddenly, raising a hand. Footsteps. 2 voices, male, coming closer. We pressed against the wall, holding our breath. The men passed by, attendants, talking casually. "New intake coming tomorrow," one said. "Full manifest." "Already? We're not even halfway through this group." "Orders came down from Aurelia Corporate," the other replied. "They're calling it Phase 2. Their voices faded around the corner. Imogen's whisper was barely audible. "Phase 2 of what?" I looked down the corridor, where the lights flickered briefly, just once, then steadied. "They're replacing us," I said. "When one of us transitions, they bring in another." Harold's eyes darkened. "A cycle. And if that's true," I said, "it means there's no end to this trip." Imogen closed her eyes. "We're not passengers. We're inventory." I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the porthole again, writing in the margins of a cruise brochure with what was left of my lip liner. Day 6. Nancy gone. Surveillance confirmed. New arrivals expected. We are not guests. We are stock. I tore the paper in half, slid one piece under my mattress, and the other into the crack of the wall vent. Let them try to erase me next. I'd make sure I left fingerprints in every corner of this floating lie. By morning, the ship had changed. Not in shape, not in sound, but in something more subtle, more suffocating. The corridors were just as beige, the food just as bland, the sea just as endless. But something had shifted. Fear was settling in. At breakfast, fewer people talked. Some didn't come at all. Chairs sat empty, trays untouched. The tablets at our doors no longer showed full schedules, just short messages like, "Today is yours to breathe." No structure means no pressure. Release is near. Release. The word tasted like poison now. I found Harold in the library, hunched over a book on nautical architecture, not turning pages. When he looked up, his eyes were heavy. "No sign of Nancy," he said. "Not even in the surveillance feeds. They scrubbed her. Imogen joined us a few minutes later, holding a deck map she'd hand-sketched from memory. Her scarf was pulled tighter today, like armor. "They're shifting protocols," she said quietly. "Less oversight, less routine. That's not freedom. That's disorientation." "They're preparing the next wave," I said. "We overheard them. New intakes coming." Harold rubbed his temples. "We're being cycled." "And replaced," Imogen added. "Like outdated files on a hard drive." We sat in silence for a while, letting it settle. Around us, a few guests shuffled between shelves, looking at books they didn't really read. I wondered how many had noticed the changes, how many had already accepted them, how many were quietly waiting to disappear. At 3 p.m., the ship held a reflection ceremony. That was the new term. The announcement came through every cabin, every lounge. Guests are invited to gather in the Horizon Room for a communal transition meditation. Participation is encouraged, but not required. I went. I had to see. The Horizon Room was one of the largest on the ship. Dome ceiling, soft lights mimicking twilight, floor-to-ceiling windows that reflected only fog. 50 chairs were arranged in a circle, most already filled. At the center stood the facilitator, the same beige-clad woman with the trained voice and timeless face. "This is a space of gentleness," she began, "a space where it's safe to let go." The guests around me nodded. Some closed their eyes. One woman clutched a handkerchief like it was a lifeline. "You are not leaving," the facilitator continued. "You are arriving into quiet, into rest, into the space beyond expectation." I scanned the faces. A few tearful, a few blank, most simply tired. And then I saw him. Sitting 3 chairs across, head slightly bowed, was Martin Lang. A retired professor, soft-spoken, always wore a brown cardigan with leather elbow patches. We'd spoken once in the garden room about Keats. He'd seemed sharp, curious. Now he looked sedated. The facilitator walked to him slowly, gently resting her hand on his shoulder. "Would you like to go first?" He didn't answer. 2 attendants stepped forward from the side door. They were smiling, kind-looking, but too smooth, like people playing nurses on TV. They took Martin's arms and lifted him to his feet. The facilitator leaned close and whispered something into his ear. He nodded. Or maybe his head just tilted. Then they walked him out through the side door. Just like that. No ceremony. No goodbye. No audience applause for a life lived. Just gone. The room stayed silent. The facilitator turned back to us. "Release is always voluntary, but courage takes many forms." Another pause. Another name. No one else stood. Not yet. The session dissolved soon after. We were invited to return to our cabins for restful recalibration. No one spoke. I stayed seated until most had left. Imogen approached from behind. "Did you see his face?" she whispered. "I saw nothing behind it," I said. "Exactly." We returned to the stairwell that night. Harold was waiting. "We found where they go," he said. He unfolded a new map. Crude, hurried. "Lower deck. Section marked R2, Care and Transition. Only accessible with triple security clearance, but I saw them go in. 2 attendants pushing a wheeled chair. It was Martin. And?" Imogen asked. "They didn't come back out." Imogen swallowed. "So what's on the other side?" Harold looked at us both. Either sedation, seclusion, or storage. But whatever it is, no one returns from it. I took out the folded paper I'd hidden earlier, reading it again. We are not guests. We are stock. Nancy had warned us. She'd tracked the turns, counted the days. kept records no one else dared make, and for that, they silenced her. We made a new plan that night. We would split up the next day, each of us following a different staff member, watching patterns, identifying access points, counting cameras, testing blind spots, quietly, patiently. This ship may have been built to erase people, but they hadn't planned for us to remember who we were, and they certainly hadn't planned for us to work together. That night, I returned to my cabin to find my tablet blinking. "Margaret, you've been selected for early reflection. Please report to the Horizon Room at 6 a.m. I didn't panic. I just smiled. They thought I'd walk willingly to the edge. They thought I'd nod, smile, and thank them for the privilege. They forgot I've buried people with more gentleness than they've offered here. And I don't walk anywhere I haven't chosen. At 5:45 a.m., I was already dressed. Black slacks, white shirt, hair pinned tight like it used to be when George and I ran our shop. The reflection room invitation blinked silently on my tablet. I didn't acknowledge it. I didn't touch it at all. Instead, I placed the tablet upside down and tucked a folded slip of paper into my waistband. Imogen's updated air duct map. She'd drawn it on the back of a placemat and passed it to me during yesterday's dinner, along with 3 almonds and a dry carrot slice. "Breakfast diplomacy," she'd whispered, "just in case today's the day." By 6, I was out the door. The hallway was empty. Too empty. They were making it easy for me. Or they thought they were. I walked toward the Horizon Room, heart steady, but steps deliberate, like I had all the time in the world. At the last junction, I paused. A staff attendant was waiting. Tall, dark ponytail, clipboard in hand. "Miss Pearson," she said gently. "Right on time." I smiled. "Of course. Wouldn't want to keep eternity waiting." She didn't react, just turned and gestured. "This way." I followed, past the Horizon Room. We moved down a hallway I hadn't seen before. Unmarked doors. Darker carpet. No music playing through the walls here. Finally, we reached a white door with no handle. She tapped a panel. The door slid open. "Please step inside." I did. The room was white, featureless. A single chair in the center. A small table with a cup of something steaming. A wall screen showing a field of waving grass. "Someone will speak with you shortly," she said, and the door sealed behind me. No lock clicked, no sound, but I knew I wasn't meant to leave. The first 15 minutes, I just sat, letting them wait, letting them wonder. Then the wall screen changed. The grass dissolved into soft colors. Blue, peach, pale green. A voice filled the room. Synthetic, pleasant, unplaceable. "Margaret, you've given much. You've held others through storms. Now it is time to be held. You don't need to think anymore, or resist. Rest is not failure. Release is not weakness." I snorted. "You're wasting this speech on the wrong woman." The voice paused, then tried again. "You are in control. That's why you've been chosen. You've shown courage, strength. But strength can soften." I stood, walked to the walls. No seams, no camera visible, but I knew they were watching. "You call this choice?" I said aloud. "Locking doors, replacing names, drugging people until they say yes?" Silence. I took the cup of tea from the table. It smelled floral, but underneath, something metallic. I poured it onto the floor. Then I pulled the map from my waistband and looked up. "You think I'm going to fold? You picked the wrong generation. We did folding, of laundry, of blankets, of stretch paychecks and bruised dignity. But not of ourselves, not today." I sat back in the chair, crossed my legs. and waited. At 7:40, the door opened. This time it was a man in a dark gray suit, not a uniform. His hair was silver, too perfect. His shoes didn't squeak. "Miss Pearson," he said, with a voice like old velvet. "I'm Thomas, one of Aurelia's well-being liaisons." I didn't stand. "Did Nancy get a liaison too?" I asked. He blinked, but only once. Some guests find reflection difficult, especially those with unresolved expectations. "You mean clarity?" "I mean grief masquerading as will." He smiled, but it didn't touch his eyes. "May I sit?" "You can kneel." A pause. "Very well." He remained standing. "This room is for your benefit, not for punishment. You've been active, observant, resistant. It's not unusual. High-functioning guests often struggle to release." "You mean people who notice your ship is a floating graveyard with a buffet?" He let out a sigh. "That kind of language is unhelpful. You're not a prisoner, Miss Pearson. You're a guest." Then unlock the door. Silence again. I thought so. I stood and walked past him, back toward the wall. Pressed my palm flat against the panel beside the exit. "Harold was right," I said. "You're not detaining us. You're counting on our fatigue. You're designing surrender." I turned. "But here's the problem. I'm not tired." Thomas studied me like a man confronted with a glitch in a system. "Then perhaps you'd benefit from a deeper calibration, a longer stay in quiet reflection. You may find in time that the world you left behind no longer needs you." I stepped close enough to smell the citrus polish on his cuffs. "I didn't leave it. It left me." He didn't answer, so I walked past him. The door opened, and I left. Back in the stairwell, I found Harold waiting. "You're early," he said. "Didn't they try the full pitch?" "Oh, they tried." Imogen arrived next, a small bruise forming on her wrist. "Attendant grabbed me when I said I wasn't going to breakfast. Had to twist his finger just to get away." "You all right?" I asked. She smiled grimly. "Old bones, still sharp." Harold unfolded a torn schedule printout. "We found the intake manifest. New guests arrive tomorrow. That means tonight's the last chance we have to get into the control deck unnoticed." "And what do we do once we're in?" I asked. Harold met my eyes. "We send a message." "To who?" "To anyone still out there," he said. "Anyone who remembers we exist." Imogen pulled something from her sleeve. A flash drive. "Found it in Nancy's sewing kit," she said. She'd labeled it Exit Plan. We all stared at it. Harold smiled. "Then I suppose we better plug it in." That night I didn't sleep. I folded a new note inside the seam of my jacket. Day 8. They tried to erase me. I remembered louder. It's strange what hope feels like after days of fear. It's quiet, focused, cold. That's what I felt as the three of us crouched behind the linen carts near the lower stairwell, watching the staff shift change. The uniforms moved like clockwork, every gesture identical, every smile too perfect. When the last of them disappeared into the lift, Harold gave a small nod. Now. We slipped down the service corridor. No music here, no scent of lavender, just metal, oil, and the low hum of machinery. The corridor narrowed until we reached a fork, one side leading deeper into the engine sections, the other toward command access, crew only. Imogen held the flash drive like a rosary. Nancy called it Exit Plan. Let's hope she meant it literally. Harold swiped the stolen badge against the panel. The red light turned green. We moved. The command deck wasn't what I expected. No grand captain's wheel, no glass dome over the ocean. It was small, sterile, like the control room of a factory. 3 empty chairs, 6 screens looping real-time data. Only one showed the horizon, but it wasn't live. The timestamp was wrong, 2 months old. "They're faking the view," Imogen whispered. "We could be anywhere. Or nowhere." Harold sat at the main console, scanning keys like muscle memory. "They've air-gapped the system. No external line. Internal network only." I looked around. The equipment was labeled Aurelia Systems Ledelit. Everything, the screens, the server racks, even the clock, bore that emblem, a stylized sun half submerged in water. Hope rebranded as Erasure. Imogen pointed to a slot. "That's a data port." She handed Harold the flash drive. "Plug her in." He hesitated. "If this trips an alarm—" "It already did the moment we started caring," I said. He pushed it in. The screens flickered. A new window appeared. File name: Horizon Log Azure. User: Nancy D. Access granted. The first line loaded automatically. Day 1, arrivals logged, 37 passengers, 12 female, 25 male. Average age 72. Day 2, no communication permitted. Crew instructed to discourage external fixation. Day 4, confirmed sedation dosage in T, haloperidol microdose. Target, compliance threshold. Day 9, 2 guests released per Phase 1 protocol. Day 12, no further shore contact. Vessel redirected per instruction Aurelia Horizon Directive. Imogen swallowed hard. She knew. I scrolled further. Day 26. "I've accessed restricted files. This is not a voyage. It's a contract. Families sign care transfer waivers. Aurelia assumes life end management. No returns. I'm writing this before they find out I've stopped drinking their tea." The screen dimmed. A new message appeared. "To whoever finds this, don't fight them one by one. Use the broadcast. It's buried in the communications deck. Room R1A. There's a manual override. You can send one message, just one. Make it count." We stared at the text in silence. Harold leaned back. "She left us the road out." Imogen wiped her eyes. "And paid for it." The monitor suddenly flickered red. "Unauthorized access detected. Please remain where you are." Harold yanked the flash drive out. "We're done here." We ran. Down the corridor, past the metal stairs, breath rasping loud in our throats. The alarm wasn't blaring yet, just that eerie red glow pulsing through the lights like a slow heartbeat. We ducked into a maintenance tunnel, slammed the hatch, and leaned against it, gasping. Imogen's hands shook as she clutched the drive. "Broadcast deck," she whispered. "Where is it?" "R1A," I said. "We passed R2 before. It's 1 level below that, near the transition hall." Harold cursed. "Perfect. They'll have guards there." "We're not sneaking past them," I said. "We're walking in." They both looked at me like I'd lost my mind. "They think we're weak," I said. "They see us as compliant. Invisible. Let's use that." Imogen straightened her scarf. "You mean walk straight into the lion's mouth?" "No," I said. "We'll make them open it." An hour later, I requested a private consultation with my assigned liaison. Thomas arrived promptly, just as I knew he would. "I had a change of heart," I told him, my tone gentle, grateful, submissive. "I think I'm ready for reflection." He studied me for a long time, then smiled. "I'm glad, Margaret. Acceptance is peace." "I'd like my friends to come with me," I added quickly. "Imogen and Harold. We want to go together. We've all made peace, you see. One final meditation." He seemed almost moved. "Together? That's rare. Beautiful, really." He didn't even question it. At 10:30 p.m., the three of us walked calmly toward the lower deck, escorted by two attendants. The hallway lights dimmed as we passed. My heart was hammering so hard it felt like it might bruise my ribs. At the end of the corridor, I saw the door marked R1, Communications, just across from R2, Care and Transition. "Wait here," Thomas said, smiling faintly. "I'll prepare the room." He turned the corner and disappeared through R2. That was his mistake. Harold grabbed the nearest attendant by the collar, slamming him into the wall. The other tried to shout. Imogen jabbed him with her cane. The first dropped his key card. I caught it midair. "Let's finish what Nancy started," I said. We ran to the door labeled R1, Communications. The key card beeped green. Inside, a control room filled with static and light. A console with an old-fashioned microphone. Imogen plugged in the flash drive. The system blinked to life. The file named Horizon Log Array appeared again. But this time, a new option flashed beneath it. "Activate external broadcast. 60 seconds. Harold exhaled. "You sure you know what you're doing?" "No," I said. But she did. And I pressed the button. The console came alive with a sound that didn't belong to this ship. Real static, raw, wild. A kind of freedom disguised as noise. Then, a low beep. "External transmission initiated. Signal window, 60 seconds. 60 seconds? Imogen whispered. "That's all?" "Then we'll make them count," I said. Harold adjusted the microphone. The system crackled. "Lines open." The red light blinked to green. I leaned in, voice steady. "This is Margaret Pearson, aboard the vessel Aurelia Horizons." For a moment, I thought I'd choke. But the words flowed like they'd been waiting years. "We were told this was a cruise. It isn't. It's a prison. They're taking the elderly, people whose families signed them over, and disappearing them. They call it reflection. They call it release. It's euthanasia dressed up as wellness. They're erasing us, one by one." Static hissed, but the light stayed green. "They drug us. They lock our doors. They tell us the world doesn't need us anymore. But we are still here. We are still alive. And we remember. Please, if anyone can hear this, tell our families, tell the world. Don't let Aurelia Horizons sail unseen any longer." A sharp alarm blared. The signal timer dropped to 20 seconds. "Harold, I'm on it!" He slammed a switch, keeping the line open. Sparks jumped from the console. Imogen gripped my shoulder. "Say it, Margaret. Say their names." I closed my eyes and spoke through the smoke. "Nancy D., taken on the 6th night. Martin Lang, taken during reflection. There will be others. Don't let them vanish quietly. We refuse to go quietly." The console flashed red. Signal terminated. The microphone went dead. For a heartbeat, everything was still. Then the door burst open. Two attendants stormed in. Pale, uniformed, emotionless. Harold stepped forward first, swinging his cane low. It caught one square in the knee. He went down with a dull grunt. The other reached for Imogen. She shoved the control panel over. It crashed, showering sparks. I grabbed the flash drive from the terminal and stuffed it down my sleeve. More footsteps in the corridor. Voices. The distant hum of something mechanical powering up. "They're sealing the lower decks," Harold said. "We need to move." We pushed past the downed attendants, sprinting into the hallway. Alarms wailed now, red lights pulsing like veins. The floor vibrated with movement beneath our feet. "Where?" Imogen shouted. "Up," I said. "Always up." We climbed the service stairs 2 at a time, lungs burning. The air grew hotter, heavier. Somewhere below, a metallic clang echoed. doors locking. By deck 4, my breath was ragged, but I didn't stop. "Deck 2, Harold gasped. "Observation deck, we can barricade." We burst through the stairwell door into the open. Wind. Real wind. Sharp and cold and biting. The first genuine sensation I'd felt since boarding. The sky was a bruised gray, the sea restless. For the first time, the fog wasn't total. In the distance, a faint outline. Land? Or another ship? Imogen clutched the railing, laughing through tears. We did it. Someone heard us. They have to have heard us. Harold turned toward me, breathing hard. "The flash drive? You kept it?" I nodded. "Nancy's file is still here. Then we've got proof. Even if they sink this damn boat." But before I could answer, a voice crackled through the ship's intercom. Thomas. Calm. Composed. "Miss Pearson, Mr. Crane, Miss Dyer. Please return to your cabins. You've compromised the vessel's safety. No harm will come to you if you comply." His tone was almost gentle, fatherly. It made my skin crawl. Imogen spat over the side of the railing. "He still thinks we're manageable." I turned to Harold. "We can't hide. They'll find us. We need leverage." He gestured toward the horizon. "There's our leverage. If someone saw the broadcast, rescue could already be coming." The speakers crackled again. "Miss Pearson," Thomas said softly, "you've caused distress. This ship's systems are delicate. You don't understand what you've done." "Oh, I understand perfectly," I muttered. "You built a coffin, and we just rang the bell." Imogen laughed, a raw, triumphant sound. Then, movement. Dozens of attendants emerging from the doors at both ends of the deck, walking in formation. Calm, precise, unstoppable. "Back!" Harold hissed. We pressed against the railing. Nowhere left to run. The sea crashed below, black and endless. Thomas appeared behind them, his perfect silver hair unmoved by the wind. "Please," he said, "don't make this harder than it needs to be. You'll be treated with respect." I raised my chin. "You'll need to redefine the word first." He sighed. "I truly am sorry, Margaret." "Funny," I said. "That's exactly what my daughter said before she handed me the ticket." For a second, no one moved. Just the wind and the ocean and the sound of alarms fading into the distance. Then Harold gripped the railing and leaned close to me. "You ever swam in your Sunday clothes?" I blinked. "You can't be serious." He smiled. "Better to drown free than die catalogued." The attendants took a step forward, and I decided, right then, that if I was going down, it wouldn't be quiet. I turned to Thomas one last time. "You can't erase people who've already lived." Then I swung my leg over the rail. Cold doesn't describe it. It wasn't temperature, it was impact. The sea hit like stone, knocking the air from my chest. Salt rushed into my mouth, my eyes, my lungs. For a moment I thought that was it, that this was how they'd win, not with poison or lies, but with water. Then Harold's hand broke through the foam and grabbed my arm. "Kick!" he gasped. "Kick, damn it!" I did. My legs, stiff from age and shock, fought the current. The ship's massive hull loomed above us, black against a bruised sky. The waves threw us apart, slammed us together again. Somewhere behind, I heard Imogen's sharp voice, half command, half prayer. She'd jumped, too. For several agonizing minutes, we fought to stay afloat. Every breath was a theft, every wave an accusation. I'd forgotten how heavy water could feel when it wanted you gone. Then, through the spray, I saw it. A faint orange glow bobbing to our right. A lifebuoy, maybe, or one of those emergency pods they kept in the lower deck. Harold lunged for it, grunting as he caught the edge. We clung there, 3 ghosts who refused to vanish. "Hold on," he shouted. "As if I have anywhere else to be." Imogen wheezed, coughing up seawater. Time blurred after that. The sea took us where it pleased. The Aurelia horizons receded into fog, its lights dimming until it was just another star swallowed by the dark. Hours passed, maybe more. We drifted, shivering, half-conscious. My thoughts fractured into flashes. Julie's empty smile, Nancy's notebook, the sound of Imogen's laugh when she realized she'd bruised her wrist, on purpose. At some point, the sky began to pale. The waves gentled. My limbs stopped obeying. Everything in me felt slow, but stubborn. I wasn't going to die floating quietly. If this was it would be with eyes open. Then I heard Harold's voice, weak, pointing. Lights. Portside. I blinked through the blur. Yes. Faint beams sweeping across the waves. Not from the Aurelia. Smaller, sharper, moving toward us. A searchlight. When I woke, everything was white. Not the ship's false white, but the kind that carries sound. Beeping monitors, muffled footsteps, the hum of real life. I was in a hospital bed. A real one. My arms were wrapped in blankets. My throat burned when I tried to speak. A nurse appeared, smiling. A real smile this time, weary but human. "Easy, Mrs. Pearson." "You're safe now," I croaked. "Harold? Imogen?" "Alive," she said softly. "They're next door. Coast Guard found you 3 miles off the main route. You're very lucky." I turned my head slightly. Through the window, I could see the harbor. The dull silhouette of the Aurelia horizons anchored under federal custody. Cameras, lights, officials in dark jackets moving along the pier. The nurse adjusted my IV. "You've caused quite a stir. That broadcast you sent out, it reached shore. All of it." I blinked at her. "All of it? All?" She nodded. "You went live for nearly 45 seconds before the system shut down. Long enough for a few maritime frequencies to pick it up. Long enough for someone to start asking questions." I felt the corners of my mouth twitch. "Good." The nurse hesitated, then lowered her voice. "They're saying the ship was registered under a private care consortium. Global Horizons Incorporated. Thousands of digital files found on board. Signed consent waivers. False death certificates. Families. Most of them didn't even know." "Some did," I whispered. "Some were relieved." She didn't answer. Later that evening, a man from the Department of Maritime Affairs came to speak with me. Gray suit, clipboard, kind eyes but practiced tone. "Mrs. Pearson," he began, "your courage saved lives. We've located 112 other passengers on board, most sedated, some under what they called voluntary reflection therapy. You, Miss Dyer, and Mr. Crane exposed something extraordinary." I stared at him. "You make it sound heroic. It wasn't. It was angry." "Sometimes anger is the only moral response," he said quietly. He took notes, asked dates, names. When he left, he pressed a card into my hand. "There'll be hearings. If you're well enough, we'd like you to testify." I turned the card over. Government seal. His name meant nothing to me. "Tell the truth," I said. "That's all the testimony I've got left." Imogen visited the next morning, moving stiffly, but with that familiar glint in her eye. "Well," she said, settling onto the edge of my bed, "turns out we make decent whistleblowers." "Speak for yourself," I rasped. "I'm still waterlogged." "Harold's already flirting with the nurses," she said. "Says it's part of his rehabilitation." I smiled. It felt strange, like remembering how to live. Outside, reporters shouted questions at the harbor gates, words like conspiracy, negligence, euthanasia program, human rights. All too late, but not too late for us. Imogen reached over, squeezed my hand. Nancy's name's on the news. Good, I said. She deserves that. She nodded, then added quietly, We should have a drink when this is over. Tea? I asked. Her mouth twitched. Whiskey. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of real life. Monitors, the clink of metal carts, the shuffling of shoes. I wasn't free yet. None of us were. But the world knew. The silence had cracked. For the first time since I boarded that ship, I felt warmth in my chest that wasn't fear. It was something harder, older. It was defiance, remembering its own name. They moved us inland 2 days later. A temporary housing facility, they called it, though it looked more like a rebranded nursing home. Pale yellow walls, framed seascapes, the smell of antiseptic and resignation. But I didn't mind. It wasn't a ship. The doors opened from the inside. That was enough for now. Harold was recovering in the room across the hall. His ribs were bruised from the fall, but he treated every doctor's visit like an interrogation. They keep asking about my dietary restrictions, he grumbled. Told one nurse the only restriction I've got is on lies. Imogen, meanwhile, had taken over the facility's common room. Within 48 hours, she'd organized the remaining survivors into what she called the Committee for Remembrance. They weren't just trading stories. They were documenting, writing names, rebuilding timelines. Nobody disappears twice, she said firmly, flipping open a notebook. When the investigators came again, I was ready. They'd set up a recording table in the main hall, a single microphone, 2 bottled waters. A man in a Navy suit introduced himself as Agent Hollis. A woman from the Ministry of Health sat beside him, tapping on a tablet. Mrs. Pearson, Hollis began, first, let me express our gratitude for your courage. Without your transmission, this case would have remained invisible. Don't thank me, I said. Thank Nancy. She left us the rope. He nodded. We're piecing together her files now. It appears this wasn't just one ship. Aurelia Horizons operated multiple vessels worldwide under different names: Serenity Voyages, Golden Passage, Horizon Care. Some were disguised as retirement cruises, others as end-of-life wellness retreats. Imogen, sitting in the back, muttered, Poetic branding for murder. Hollis went on. We've found extensive digital evidence, encrypted contracts from family members transferring custodial rights, payments disguised as estate transition fees. Some participants likely knew what they were signing. Others were deceived. He paused, looking at me. Would you say you suspected your daughter's involvement? The question landed like a stone. I took a breath. She thought she was giving me comfort, I said slowly. And convenience. Mostly convenience. People don't wake up one day and decide to kill their parents. They just stop wanting to deal with them. Someone offered her a clean way to wash her hands, and she took it. The woman beside him typed silently, eyes lowered. I don't hate her, I added, but I'll never let her rewrite what happened. Hollis leaned forward. Would you be willing to say that publicly? I met his gaze. I already did. 45 seconds of truth over open water. I'll do it again. The press came a week later. They weren't prepared for us. They expected fragile victims, not an army of furious survivors in cardigans and orthopedic shoes. Harold insisted on standing behind the podium, cane and all. We're not relics, he told the cameras. We're witnesses. Don't call this a tragedy. Call it what it is: disposal. When it was my turn, I said less. Words didn't need volume anymore. They told us rest was courage, I said into the microphones. That surrender was peace. But peace isn't silence. Peace is truth. We were silenced, and we made noise. The reporters scribbled, lenses flashing. I didn't flinch. That night, I finally called Julie. Her voice cracked when she answered. Mom? I don't even know what to say. Then start with the truth, I said. There was a long pause, filled with static and guilt. I didn't know, she whispered. They said it was monitored rest, that you'd have medical staff, that it was safe. They lied, I said quietly, but you signed it. I thought I was helping. Helping who? I asked. Me? Or yourself? Her breath caught. I'm so sorry, Mom. I closed my eyes. I don't need sorry. I just need you to remember that I'm still here. And that's not a burden. She started to cry. I let her. Then, softly, I said, You can visit when you're ready. But don't bring gifts. Bring questions. The next morning, the first news article went live. The Floating Forgotten. Inside the Aurelia Horizons scandal. Our faces were blurred, but our words weren't. They quoted my line about surrender. They printed Nancy's note. They even showed the photo of the ship, anchored and empty. A red sun rising behind it like accusation. Imogen clipped the article and pinned it on the bulletin board above the TV. Proof of life, she said. Harold snorted. Proof of noise. But that night, when the hallway lights dimmed, I caught them both sitting under that board, just looking. Quietly proud. Quietly alive. I sat by my window, moonlight spilling across the linoleum floor, and opened my journal. Day 12. We were found. We were believed. We were loud. The sea couldn't keep us. The world couldn't ignore us. And I'm not done speaking yet. 2 months passed before they stopped calling us the survivors and started calling us the witnesses. I preferred the second. Survivor sounded like something happened to us. Witness sounded like something we refused to let die. By then, the investigation had cracked wide open. The Aurelia ships, 7 of them in total, were docked in harbors across 3 continents, seized under court orders. Every week, new faces appeared in the papers. Daughters, sons, grandchildren, all swearing they had no idea what their loved ones had signed. Maybe some of them didn't. But ignorance isn't innocence. Imogen said it best. They wanted to forget without guilt. The company just sold them the language for it. I was moved to a small apartment near the courthouse for easier access to the hearings. The city was noisy. Buses, horns, kids laughing on sidewalks. I hadn't heard that kind of sound in months. It made me uneasy, but grateful. Real life had texture again. Every morning, Harold and I were driven to testify. He wore a suit that looked older than I was, his medals pinned crookedly on his chest. Remind them we once built things, not just broke, he'd say. Inside the courtroom, the press watched us like we were artifacts from another time, relics that somehow still glowed. The executives from Aurelia Horizons Global sat behind their lawyers, all in navy and gray, their faces scrubbed clean of emotion. The lead prosecutor, a young woman named Evans, opened with a simple statement. They called it care. It was abandonment. When it was my turn to speak, I kept it short. They didn't want us to die. They just didn't want to watch it happen, I said into the microphone. So they outsourced their guilt. The defense tried to rattle me. They asked if I was on medication, if I might have been confused at sea, if, perhaps, psychological trauma had blurred my recollection. I looked at the lawyer, a boy really, barely 30. You think I need perfect memory to remember betrayal? I asked. The gallery erupted in murmurs. Evans smiled faintly. Afterward, she caught me in the hallway. You have a gift for the truth, she said. No, I told her. Just practice. Imogen testified the next day. She read out the names Nancy had recorded, every one of them. Each syllable hung heavy in the room. When she finished, there wasn't a sound but the clicking of keyboards from journalists trying to keep up. Later, she joined me outside under the courthouse steps. We shared a thermos of coffee that tasted faintly of metal. I thought I'd feel free when this was over, she said. You don't? She shook her head. Freedom's too small a word for what we lost. Then let's find a bigger one, I said. She smiled tiredly. You always did talk like a teacher. I always was one, I said. They just stopped listening for a while. The verdict came in early autumn. The court found Aurelia Horizons guilty on multiple counts of fraud, unlawful confinement, and negligent homicide. Sentences were handed down, investigations opened into the partnering wellness foundations. It was victory, technically, but not justice. Nancy's body was never found. Dozens of families were still searching. Some refused to believe the truth, claiming their relatives had chosen peace. Others simply didn't answer reporters' calls. The company folded. Its executives promised compensation funds. But no amount of money could buy back the right to be remembered. After the final hearing, a reporter stopped me outside. She was young, maybe 25, and her microphone trembled in the wind. Mrs. Pearson, she asked, what will you do now that it's over? Over? I repeated. You think people stop forgetting just because it's been televised? She blinked. I took a slow breath. I'm going to start something. What kind of something? Something loud, I said. A place that keeps names, stories, voices. Somewhere the old don't vanish when the young get busy. That evening, Imogen, Harold, and I met in the small courtyard outside the facility where most of the rescued still lived. We called it the Harbor, not as a joke, as reclamation. Imogen read aloud a list of names, those still missing, those buried under false certificates. Harold raised his hand after each one, like roll call. When she finished, I spoke. Here's the rule, I said quietly. Every week we read them again. Every week we remember them. And when one of us goes, the others keep reading. We don't stop until there's no one left to forget. Harold nodded. Then I suppose we've got work to do. Later that night, I sat alone by the window of my little apartment. The street below was full of ordinary noise, a dog barking, a bus braking, laughter from a bar. I took out Nancy's flash drive from my drawer. They'd returned it after the trial. It was still scratched, dented, nearly ruined. I whispered, "We did it, Nancy." And for a moment, in the faint hum of the city, I almost heard her answer back. Winter came early that year. Sharp air, gray mornings, the kind of cold that settles in your joints before you even notice. But I didn't mind it. Cold means you're still alive enough to feel. The harbor had grown. What started as 12 survivors sitting in a circle of hospital chairs had become nearly 60. Some used walkers, others wheelchairs. Some spoke easily, others only nodded. But we all showed up. Every week. Every name read aloud. Every story told again, until it became real enough that no one could erase it. We met in the chapel the hospital forgot about, the one with peeling paint and a broken heater. Imogen said it suited us. We're not decoration, she liked to say. We're the cracks that prove it was built by hand. Harold managed the records. He typed with 2 fingers, slow but precise, cataloging every testimony, every scrap of evidence the press hadn't bothered to print. He called it the living archive. "Because that's what we are," he said. "Living evidence." One afternoon, a letter arrived. Handwritten, stamped from Boston. Julie's handwriting. I turned it over 3 times before opening it. "Mom, I've been to the hearings." I sat in the back. I didn't speak to anyone. I didn't think I had the right. I know what I signed. I know what it cost. And I know saying I didn't understand doesn't undo anything. You don't owe me forgiveness. You don't even owe me a reply. But I want you to know. I told my children what happened. I said your name. I said I failed you. Love, Julie. The paper trembled slightly in my hands, not from weakness, from anger that had nowhere left to go. Then I folded the letter neatly and placed it in the binder beside Nancy's notes. Because forgiveness isn't about letting someone off the hook. It's about keeping the story from dying with you. By February, the harbor had started attracting visitors, journalists, university researchers, even a few students. They asked polite questions about the cruise, about recovery, about resilience in later life. I hated that word. Resilience. It sounds like something you're supposed to perform to make others feel better. When one of them asked me what lesson I'd learned, I told her the truth. Don't let anyone decide what peace should look like for you, and don't ever trust an invitation without a return address. Imogen laughed so hard she had to wipe her glasses. We began mailing small newsletters, simple printouts with the harbor's updates, survivor essays, poetry, even recipes. We called it Still Here. Within months, copies started showing up in care homes and libraries across the country. People wrote back. Letters came from women I'd never met, widows, mothers, daughters, each one saying some version of I thought I was the only one who felt invisible. One letter said, "You made me remember my mother's voice." That one I kept in my coat pocket. I still do. The government offered us compensation eventually, polite checks in sterile envelopes. Restitution for trauma and unlawful detainment. Most of us cashed them. But Imogen, of course, refused. "Money's too quiet," she said. "I'd rather they keep hearing from me." She started giving talks at universities. She'd walk up to the podium with her cane, look at the crowd of fresh faces, and say, "You'll all be old someday. Remember that before you decide what an old life is worth." And she never used notes. Sometimes, when the meetings ended, we'd walk outside together, wrapped in scarves and stubbornness. Harold would light one of his forbidden cigarettes and say, "Imagine if Nancy could see this." "She can," I'd say. "She's in every noise we make." The sea wasn't far from the facility. On clear days, you could smell it. Sharp, metallic, real. I'd stand at the fence line and watch the horizon, thinking of that endless fog, of how easily it had hidden us. Now, whenever the wind blew in from the east, I imagined it carrying the voices of everyone who never made it home. Not ghosts, reminders. You can't silence what refuses to disappear. That spring, a reporter called to tell me that a documentary was in production. "They're calling it The Forgotten Voyage," she said. "We'd like you to narrate, Mrs. Pearson. Your words, the ones from the broadcast, they're the spine of the story." I hesitated. "And what happens after people watch it?" "Maybe nothing," she said honestly. "But they'll know." That was enough. I told her yes. The night before the first day of filming, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window, listening to the hum of streetlights, the pulse of the city. And for a fleeting second, I miss the ship. Not the lies, not the fear, but the clarity that comes when you realize how little you have left to lose. It's strange, the things that keep you alive. Sometimes it's fury. Sometimes it's the sound of someone remembering your name. And sometimes it's just the decision to keep talking, even when the world wishes you'd rest. They filmed me in a small room with a single lamp and a white wall. No makeup, no polish, just a microphone and the truth. The director asked me to start with the phrase from my broadcast, the one that had gone viral, the one that strangers now printed on tote bags and protest signs. We are still alive, and we remember. But I didn't say it right away. I looked at the lens, quiet for a long moment. Then I said, "Let me tell you how remembering really feels. It feels like coffee gone cold because you were staring out the window, wondering what would have happened if you'd just said no to the gift. It feels like standing in front of a mirror, older than you ever expected to be, and realizing you were almost erased like a smudge. It feels like the day after a funeral, not the grief, but the silence. The way your body keeps doing its little tasks, while your soul still waits for someone to answer. And then, it changes. You start noticing how your name sounds again when someone says it without pity. How your legs move not to escape, but to arrive. You begin to believe that being forgotten wasn't your fault. That the world's blindness isn't your burden to fix, but its shame to carry. That's remembering. And that's survival. After the interview, I walked home alone. It had rained while we filmed. The sidewalks were slick, the air full of puddle steam, and the sharp smell of worms and wet concrete. I passed a woman in her 50s standing outside a laundromat, arguing with someone on the phone. She caught my eye, and I nodded. She didn't smile, but she nodded back. That's the kind of thing I notice now. People still paying attention to other people. Not everyone is gone. Not everything is lost. The harbor still meets. Harold keeps adding names to the living archive, though his handwriting's more tremor than line these days. Imogen doesn't talk quite as long at the microphone, but her pauses now feel like punctuation, not frailty. We lost 2 members this month. Natural causes, real ones. But their names went up on the wall with the others. Not as victims, as full lives, as witnesses. Every Friday, we hang a note on the front door of the meeting room. Just a piece of paper, nothing fancy. It says, "You are not a burden, you are a story. Come in." And people do. I don't know how long I have left. None of us do. But I know what I won't let happen. I won't be erased quietly. I won't stop speaking so someone else can pretend I didn't happen. And I won't ever, ever mistake comfort for safety again. We were told it was a cruise, but we turned it into a signal. We made it loud. We made it count. So if you're reading this, if you made it this far, I ask just one thing. Don't look away. Not from your mother's face. Not from your neighbor's silence. Not from the people who sit quietly at the edges of the room and are never asked if they want to speak. Look them in the eye and listen. Because the moment you forget, someone like Aurelia is ready to take over and write your story for you. And let me tell you, they won't get the ending right. If this story moved you, share it. Say the names of the ones who never made it home. Don't let the world pretend it didn't happen, because we are still here, and we remember.